Hello and welcome to eBay.ie Online Fashion Week. I'm Darren Kennedy and tonight we're discussing the editors. Yes, it's the Devil Wears Prada type of stuff. If you are joining us live via web stream, make sure to join the conversation and keep us posted on your thoughts and any questions you might have by simply tweeting using the hashtag eBayOFW, and we'll be coming to as many of them as possible throughout the evening. We've got a lovely posse of fashion followers here tonight who'll also be joining the conversation, and of course our guests. We've got a nice treat for you tonight. To my immediate right is Melanie Morris, editor of Image magazine, and just next to her we've got Constance Harris, editor from the Sunday Independent. So tonight really is an opportunity to find out about these guys, how they got to where they are today, and what they do on a day-to-day basis, because I'm intrigued. Melanie, if we start with you.
Right.
I want to know both your backgrounds. I mean, did you always want to be an editor?
No, I started my career in fashion PR. I, from a very early age, had heard about a woman in London called Lynn Franks, who is the woman that they based Absolutely Fabulous on. She was the Adina Monsoon character. And I'd heard about her, not for her Adina Monsoonness, but more for the clients that she had and the work she was doing in London. And at that stage, it was the sort of mid to early 80s. And there was a huge explosion of street fashion in London at the time, and it was really, really all taking off, and I couldn't wait to get over there. So I did a degree in UCD, and as soon as I graduated, I went over. And thankfully, through an Irish guy who was actually involved at the Sunday Indo, a guy called Greg Delaney, one Irish man helped an Irish girl and got me working at British Fashion Week, which Lynn Franks did the PR for. And I managed to get some work experience there. Then I managed to get an interview with the company, and then I managed to get a job there. So I worked there for 6 years.
Did you?
Then I worked for a guy called Matthew Freud for another year and a half, who was big into doing an awful lot of showbiz stuff as well as fashion. And then I returned to Ireland, and in the mid-90s started my own magazine called D-Side. And it came about because somebody was looking for an editor to work on a magazine for Debs. And I thought that was a rotten idea. And he said, well, what should you do? And without realising what I did, I put together loads and loads of pictures that I tore out of British and international style magazines. And I said, I think that's what you should do. And he said, well, how do I do it? And I didn't realise what I was doing, but I went up to the distributors and asked them how magazines sold. And then I went to the advertising agencies and asked them how stuff came about and what they advertised in. And I went back and presented to this guy. He said, great, do it. I should have known that it was far too easy. I went off, I started filling all the editorial, and then he met me to say that actually he wasn't going to do it anymore. But I'd all this editorial ready to go. So I decided, you know what, I was very naive, and I decided to give it a lash. And so I edited and published a magazine called D-Side for 10 years before I came to Image.
So you kind of just fell into it, really.
Completely, and I'm sure 99 people in this room. I see Susie Cohn, who's our fashion editor in Image at the moment. She started in D-Side coming from insurance, am I right? Yeah. So
that's a leap. And what did you study?
Commerce in UCD.
Okay,
BCom.
so you not fashion related.
Not very good at the accountancy or any of that kind of stuff. But I did a BCom because I was told that the male to female ratio was 3 to 1.
You're always onto a winner when you hear that, aren't you? Constance, how about you?
My route is the complete opposite now. I grew up in the fashion business. My mother was a fashion writer before me. She worked in the Irish Independent as a journalist in the 70s. And I was literally dragged around warehouses and wholesalers from a very young age. And so Crown Alley, not far away from here, was kind of my stomping ground with Mike Bunn's photographic studio. And some of you might have heard of Mike Bunn as kind of one of the great granddaddies of Irish fashion photography. And, John Roche and Michael Mortel, Maureen Whisker, Lady Keogh, Sharon Hoy, all these people were knocking around in those days. And we had a huge, we had quite a good manufacturing industry at that time as well. So there was a lot to see in Ireland when I was growing up in the late 70s and the 80s. And what happened was my mother went on to edit Image magazine in the early 80s, and her very last job, last month of editing it in 1985 or 6, I can't remember which, she said, right, do you want your chance? Because I'd been her bag lady for years, assisting her, because she loved styling her own shoots, even though she was editing the magazine. And so she gave me the shot. I did my first shoot with Conor Horgan, and that was me then launched as a stylist. And I carried on styling for many years. I went to college, but I studied film and communications. And so that's why, for me, fashion photography is the most important part of what my job is. And I constantly refer back to it in everything I do. So that was me.
And the rest is history, as
And the
they
rest
say.
is history, yeah.
So, I mean, to demystify what you guys actually do on a day-to-day basis. I mean, everyone, great news today, actually, I saw it on Twitter via Image. The Devil Wears Prada 2, the book, is coming out apparently. Yes, I'm hoping for a second film. Little sideline there for you. You heard it here first. On a day-to-day basis, what do you guys actually do? And I know your jobs will be slightly different obviously, because
yes,
you're a monthly
yeah.
magazine and you're working
But
on a
also
weekly.
she's an editor, whereas I'm a fashion editor. So I'm a section, whereas
Yes.
Melanie will have a whole other grasp of things than I would.
So I'd be more office-based and you'd be out and about an awful lot
Probably,
more.
yeah, more like Susie.
So what's a typical day for you?
Well, a typical day is basically checking emails, and you know, you get, and that's a huge part of our job these days. I'd get an awful lot of unsolicited shoots sent to me, a lot of photographers and stylists. Because I'm so interested in photography, I'm very willing to spend time looking at unsolicited work, which a lot of people wouldn't necessarily make the time for or have the time for it. So Melanie, when she did D-Side, it became very known for very edgy photography, very avant-garde fashion shoots, which commercial publications can't afford to do necessarily.
But people did them for free.
They did them for free,
Yeah.
and so but there was a real creative zeitgeist because of that, because there was nothing to be lost, I suppose, in it. Whereas when you're doing a shoot that's paid for, there's a huge amount to be lost, and so. But that's that's inspirational stuff, but it's not necessarily commercial stuff. But anyway, I like to nurture that where I see it, while also balancing what the Sunday Independent needs with Life magazine. Because when you work for a commercial publication, you have to think about, you know, your readers, your advertisers. We're the largest selling newspaper in the country. We have a readership of about 1 million. You've got to think about 1 million people, keeping them happy, you know. So you can't necessarily go off on a tangent. But as a fashion editor, I like to go off on tangents. Do you know what I mean? So I like to do, okay, a little bit of the trends, but I'm really more interested in, you know, I don't know, hitting this particular demographic that I think might be ignored, or the romantic Irish, or, you know, the street Irish. But anyway, to start of the day, emails, and then if there's an awful lot of launches all the time, as you know, that, you know, you have to stay in touch with all the product. And so you're never really off duty. I mean, I'm sure you are the same, that when you go on holidays, you instantly check out all the shops. I mean, you can't stop yourself, and you assess everything from the point of view of your job. You know, you're walking down the street and you're looking at their shoes. You're never off. So that's the way I look at the day.
Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, you do get jaded, and I remember somebody said to me one time, you know, Constance, you're I can't remember exactly the word, but basically, I hung in there was the phraseology, right? Because there seems to be kind of a 3-year turnaround with people in the fashion industry, that they kind of last 3 years and then they drop out. A lot of people do, because it's not just glitz and glamour and clothes and freebies. That's what a lot of people think. It's not. It's hard work. It's slog. It's an awful lot of talking. It's an awful lot of negotiation, isn't it? And, you know, and so. I remember one time when I was kind of burning out, that my mother said to me, you know, when you feel yourself burning out, go back to the students, she said. And this has been the advice that has sustained me throughout my career, that whenever I feel myself getting bored or jaded or disenchanted of fashion, I go right back to the students, and I'll go to Limerick College of Art, or I'll go to Cork or Mallow or Sallynoggin or wherever it is, and look at what they're doing. And that always makes you excited again. Even just one session with the graduates, you know. So that's a very important part of my job now.
And how about for you, Melanie? Would it be very different?
My day would probably be a bit different, but I have to echo something you're just saying there, Constance, and that is, I'm a great believer in, while a lot of my work is desk-bound, that nothing is ever learnt at your desk. It's much better to get out and experience it firsthand. So, you know, you can be getting emails coming in that are telling you the exact same thing, but when you make the effort to get out and to meet people and to talk to people, everything becomes 3D. It becomes an awful lot more real. And I think that's what puts the fire in your belly, and that's what stops burning out or getting bored or whatever. That you are, a little spark can come from the strangest of places and the oddest of experiences. And I must say that's what keeps me going. On my day, it was brought to my attention yesterday that 80% of my time is spent firefighting or dealing with stuff. That there's usually, so I suppose it helps to be decisive, because there'd be a huge amount of decisions to make every day. And it could be something really, really small, like where will we put the credit for that contributor, to something really, really big, like where are we going to spend 50% of our budget for a month, or which photographers we're going to use, or what we're going to commit to. So I would spend a certain amount of time on email. I always think that kind of the email is the grouting in the tiles, that it's the bit that goes on in between everything else. A lot of time working out what's going into an issue and actually pushing the issue together and pushing it forward. I suppose I'm lucky in Image that we have a team of about 8 working on editorial in-house. And then we have 1.5, an art director and an intern. So and we have a very little time to put what we put through. And I'm sure any editor will say that we don't have time. But so a lot of the time would be spent just managing that and putting it through. And I would love to write more. And I get to write bits in Image, but I'd love to be writing more because that's my background. But a lot of the time it's finding people and it's finding new ideas and it's, you know, putting stories together with the editors that are working on them. So we'd maybe have, you know, features editor, fashion editor, beauty editor, and an assistant editor, all of whom commission, and I commission. So it's literally just keeping tabs on everything. I always say it's the chair and the whip, and just managing to get through the day. And sometimes the day will end at 4 o'clock, and sometimes the day will end at midnight. So you just keep going and wake up the next day and it's different.
What is the number one trait, do you think, any editor needs?
Decisiveness.
Decisiveness.
Definitely.
Right, so if you're indecisive, look for a different gig. Because you'd be there all year otherwise, I guess.
No, you have to make quick decisions. And you have to be able to live with your decisions. And
yes, and that's a very big one.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, which is really hard, is having the guts to, as I had to do today, to come in and completely rebrief somebody and go, I'm really, really sorry. Yesterday we thought we were going to do it this way. I'm sorry, I've had a chance to think about it.
But did you actually say sorry? Because we kind of, you know, again, it's what's portrayed in the media.
Yes, I did.
Well, you see, that's so lovely to hear, because what's portrayed in the media is this, you know, this kind of fascist dictator, basically, who's kind of saying, no, get out of my way.
I think Ireland is very different to other countries. I think that fascist dictator thing is the case outside of Ireland. But I think we in Ireland, because it's such a small pool, you can't afford to go around telling people that they're, you know, crap, you know, or you're useless or blah, blah, blah. You can't do that. You have to find subtler ways and you have to get along.
I can remember my very first day in Lynn Franks. They gave me a 14-page document to fax. And for those that may remember a fax machine, I had no idea how to send a fax. Nobody would tell me. Nobody would show me. So I was trying to work it out. And in the end, they just went to people and bitched that the Irish girl couldn't work a fax machine. So they couldn't even come up and go, come here, let me show you this. You know, I also managed to completely insult the fashion editors or the fashion director's boyfriend at the Christmas party. And nobody spoke to me for a week and nobody would tell me what I had done.
What did you do?
He was a teacher. He couldn't get work in Ireland. He tried to come to Ireland and get work. I tried to explain that he didn't speak Irish, so that would cut down his options of places he could get work. He heard, your English, go back there.
Well, listen, you survived, obviously. Let's go to Twitter now for a couple of questions. Remember, if you have any questions, you can tweet us using the hashtag eBay.OFW. We have one here. Melanie, how do you make yourself stand out when applying for journo jobs in a magazine?
Have a good blog that you keep up to date.
Now, that is an interesting question because it came up on Monday when we were discussing the rise of the fashion blogger. And I think someone did ask that question, you know, does it help to have a blog on your CV? So from your perspective...
Well, absolutely. I suppose it would be my version of what a portfolio would be.
Yeah, you see, the difference is that I write my articles, so therefore we're not looking for writers. That's, you know, now other sections, I do read work that's submitted to me, but I'm not actually a commissioning editor in terms of writing. So what I do is I forward it on to people who are.
But even in terms of photography, would a blog be of use or no?
No, I look at websites. Mainly photographers would mainly have the websites. You know, that it's the photographers I concentrate on. You know, styling is a different deal.
But from my perspective, I suppose it's great to get a CV. It's great to be told all of these things. But actually, a blog is a CV brought to life. And for example, our beauty editor has gone on maternity leave, and we were looking for a replacement beauty editor, and they're really hard to find, and we chose Ellie Balfe, who I knew as a makeup artist for years, but she has a beautiful blog called Ellie Loves, and it's stunning, and her style and her way of writing and her vision were just absolutely what we were looking for. But she's never worked in a magazine before, and yet she's fitted in absolutely perfectly. She's doing great.
So would you consider that a risk?
Having a blog?
No, taking someone like Ellie who's never worked in a magazine.
But I would normally recruit new blood rather than tired old things like me.
And would she have approached you now, or were you kind of just doing your own little bit?
No, I approached her.
Right.
Yeah. But based on her blog, and anyone who writes into us and sends in, you know, who wants to write for us or who wants to come into Image, the first thing I look at, I'll probably even just scan through the email to see if there's a blog at the bottom and click on it.
Very interesting. Who's got a blog in here? Show them up. Come on, don't be shy. Yeah, okay, there you go, you never know. We'll take another question on Twitter. What's the best piece of advice you've been given? Either.
Well, I gave you mine, which is go back to the students when you get jaded. So go back to source. The other thing was that, and I said this before, that Michael Mortell told me, decide in the beginning whether you want to work in Ireland or work abroad, because Ireland, the Irish market is as demanding as the whole world. And he's right about that, actually, and very much my approach as a fashion editor of Life magazine is to cater to the Irish market, not to cater to the international one, not to be aspiring, yes, be aware of the international scene, but Irish people like Irish things, they like Irish celebrity, Irish models, blah, blah, and I followed that dictate, and I've made studying Ireland my specialty, rather than studying the world.
We do love to see Irish.
We love people, and that's
things,
one of the cornerstones of image. We always start with people.
So what's been the best piece of advice you've received?
I suppose that the rule I live my life by is that great expression, don't look down. That if we actually all stopped and thought about what we were doing, we'd never get up out of bed in the morning and do it. So you're better off just doing it and worrying about it later. And just not really, don't look down, just keep going forward.
I like that, don't look down.
Yeah.
Well, people don't realise when they work in creative media that they're actually projecting their personalities out all the time, all their feelings about sex, about themselves, about the world. So there's no point in dissembling in any way or hiding. You're there, and just, as Melanie said, live with the consequence of your decisions, live with the consequence of put out there. You were young once, So
I imagine that being quite daunting, though.
it can be when you realise it, but then you can't past it.
The great thing about magazines or newspapers or anything online, well, online is probably there a little bit longer, but there's always another magazine coming out, or there's always a new edition or whatever. So even if this one isn't what you want, there'll be another one that'll take over from it.
Do we have any questions on the floor? Yes, go ahead.
I do. With so many young people leaving Ireland at the moment, what inspires you? I know you've kind of touched on it, but what inspires you about Ireland? Because both of you have a wealth of experience. I'm sure you will be valued in London or New York or wherever you want to go. What keeps you enthusiastic about Ireland specifically? And what would you say to people who maybe want to get into the industry to keep them here?
Well, I would say what I love about Ireland is that it's home and it's what I know about. And I loved my experience abroad. It was brilliant, and it taught me a load of things that I would never have learned had I been based in Ireland all along. But we know each other very well. We know how we all work. We have a nice quality of life here, even when it's a bit crappy. So I suppose it's where I like working. And, we're governed or exposed equally to Europe and Britain, more Britain and the States. So we kind of get the best of both worlds in our own little island. Why would I encourage somebody to stay? I wouldn't. I'd say go abroad and get some experience and come back, because it will open your eyes and it'll teach you new ways to do things. But, I mean, just because you're based somewhere doesn't mean you can't still contribute to something in Ireland. As Darren will tell you.
Yes, yeah. I mean, from my experience, I just think, and it kind of goes back to something you said earlier on, Constance, is for the same amount of effort, you can put it in anywhere. It doesn't matter. Just because it's a bigger market, it's the same amount of effort. So you just have to decide what you want and what's right for you at that time in your life. I mean, that's just the way. I think you can overthink it as well. But I think go because you want to, not because you think you should. Because I think if you don't enjoy it and if you don't go with a fire in your belly, you'll just come home with your tail in between your legs.
Yeah, I mean, I think going away is a great advantage because you build up your confidence, you learn to stick your neck out, and you learn to realise actually that you're pretty good. Because I think Irish people certainly used to have a tendency to think that they weren't good enough compared to other people. And, I remember because I lived in the UK for 4 years and I lived in the States just for 6 months, but I went to the UK and didn't realise that actually not only was my diploma of 3 years in Rathmines far superior to their degree, but I had more cop on because I had spent a lot more time in contact with people in Saturday jobs or summer jobs or whatever. And so Irish people, I think I was talking to somebody recently who's just headed up quite a big company in the UK. They had a division here and she's taking over the UK, and she just says she cannot get over how we think a lot more. Do you know what I mean? We just think on our feet. It seems to be, maybe it's because we have big families and we're always negotiating the politics of that, but it translates very well outside. And yes, going away is definitely fantastic for bringing back a more rounded, stronger, confident individual.
But I think also the Irish, we bat above our weight all
Yes.
the time. If you think of how many amazing Irish fashion designers there are around the world doing fantastic things, if you think of how many great sports people, if you think how many great writers, we're a very, very talented race for the small little population that we are. And I think, you know, it's a cliche, but when you go abroad, people are willing to listen to you. And, you know, there will always be an Irish contingent of creatives to hook into. Which is a very, very handy launching pad. But I think the great thing about Ireland, and I've always maintained, is that if you want to do something, if you want to get in with, you know, a career or a stream or whatever, it probably takes about 4 to 6 months of effort, which means going and hanging out in the right places, going online and getting your Twitter and your blog and your, you know, Facebook up and running. But if you really want something, you can make an awful lot of noise very quickly in Ireland and get where you want with speed, if it's meant to be.
Okay, another question on Twitter. This is from the SS Constant. She's in the room. What is your attitude to PR in relation to finding material to cover? It's quite an interesting one.
Well, I find a PR that oftentimes people actually don't think of original stuff at all. They just send out very general press releases, and they don't think in any way about what the product is that I work on. They don't seem to analyse the personality of the editor concerned and tailor the ideas. So, like, for my money, and this is going to be quite controversial, but one of the best PR people I dealt with left this country 10 years ago. And when she was looking for publicity for her clients, she got Pádraig Sweeney in. She thought of interesting, innovative ideas for her clients. She never stopped bombarding me with ideas that I couldn't turn down. So that very proactive attitude. Now, it's not that people aren't doing what PR is supposed to be doing, but I actually think to stand out with all the information right now, you have to be thinking more creatively.
I would agree, and I think it's the kind of the bespoke approach that really, really works, because what Constance is looking for and what I'm looking for are probably two very different things. But if you have a client who applies to both of us, get out the magazine, open it, read it, get familiar with what sections there are. I'm sick of people, getting in touch with us and telling us that they've got something for our health page. We don't have a health page. That's just thick.
Yes.
That's a fail, an instant fail.
If they don't care, why should we care?
Yeah. But one of the best approaches I got last year was from a guy who does the PR for a computer games company. And he rang me up to try and sell this to me. And I'm on the phone to him. I have no idea where he's from because he's called me on a mobile number. I don't know what's going on until he says to me, the biggest growth area in these games are females 36 and upwards. And, here's the story and here's the pitch. And in fact, it was the PR company who do the PR for, I don't know if you all know Bejeweled and Plants vs. Zombies and all of those games. I went out to, and it was a brilliant experience. I went out to Seattle and I learned about an industry I have no idea about. But it was a perfectly pitched story. It was brilliant, and they got 5 pages out of it. But it was really, really interesting. But that's somebody who's thinking and who's going, do you know what, women 36, they got out our details of image, they saw that the profile was right.
That is clever.
Yeah.
Remember, we're taking questions on Twitter using the hashtag eBay.OFW. Got a nice little comment coming in here from We Speak Style. Great to hear Constance Harris talking about the inspiring talent of our fashion students.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Another question here. How has Irish fashion journalism / editing changed in recent times?
It's certainly changed a lot in the 15 years. Like about 15 years ago, people would just turn up, go to a show, report on leg lengths, skirt lengths, and that kind of stuff. Now they're taking in the whole international scene. They're taking in the high street element of it. People have to be more label literate, don't they? Definitely, they have to know the hot products. Certainly, the way I write is that I like to refer it back to, I suppose, from a self-awareness point of view and where we are in our lives and cultures and philosophy and social. I tend to do it from that.
We're probably about more of a quick fix, which is an awful way to say it. But we were talking about this today in the office, and once upon a time in the September and the March issue, you would do your new season's looks and your catwalk reports. But if we did that now in that way, we would probably be the last people talking about the trends because they're streamed live. The catwalk shows are streamed live from the shows. The bloggers are writing about it straight away. So we need to think of more interesting ways to interpret the looks and maybe be more solution driven. So we're inspiring, but we're also giving the solution to the reader.
And do you think, in terms of obviously the economy that we're in at the moment, how has that affected your magazines? Because obviously, your publications.
Yeah. Sorry,
Well, I was going to say it's quite interesting because a lot of the time people say, oh, for God's sake, you've got these really expensive clothes in the magazine. And the answer is, we always did. We could never afford the €6,000 Dolce & Gabbana dress. We just wanted to see it, to be inspired and to know that it was on the planet and existed. I suppose what we're doing now is we're putting in more high street, we're putting in more boutique or whatever, we're making an effort to do that. But if you can't see where the Gucci dress, you don't know what the derivative of it is.
You also have to constantly re-educate your reader as well. And it is interesting that at the moment luxury goods are growing by 7% per annum as a market, which means that not to have the expensive garment or product in your magazine is not to reflect actually an industry that is growing. But, fashion is aspirational first and foremost, and it has been since the beginning of time when man hit an animal over the head and took the skin and put it on its back and showed it was a great hunter, So to only have high street would not give people inspiration, right? It all starts with pure creativity, and that starts at designer level and it filters down. And as editors, what we are doing is spotting those things up there and then spotting them down on the street and constantly doing that melange, that mixing backwards and forwards. But it is interesting what you were saying about the March and September. I remember 4 years ago there was a big change whereby I never would tackle autumn before August. I just had a thing that it was depressing to have winter clothes on the page in August. Brown Thomas had its first winter delivery on the floor in May. Okay, I can't not reflect that in the magazine, and I'm sure, if you didn't have, because the other thing is all the magazines have different lead times because down to the quality of their paper. So, Melanie, your lead time is what?
Well, we're actually not too bad. We're just putting August together now, so it's actually not as bad as it could be.
Yeah.
But once we get into a new season, because the new season kind of stops and starts things, but we will probably be doing September, October, November around the same time.
Yes.
And in
okay.
terms of shoots, we would definitely shoot 2 issues at a time, maybe even 3.
Yeah, so that's 2 to 3 months in advance. Ours is, I have to have everything ready 4 weeks in advance, so that really means 6 to 7 weeks in terms of anticipation and planning. The Irish Independent Weekender can do it that week. So all of us, it depends on the medium, bloggers can do it that day, that minute. So we're all anticipating from that point of view. And I think the longer your lead time is, the more authoritative you actually have to be, and the more far-reaching in your vision, and your photography has to be better, and everything just has to be.
Do you ever get it
spot
wrong?
on. Well, no, we never get it wrong.
Right answer.
Not so much that we've been fired.
Well, hang on in there, that's what I
Yes.
say. We'll go for another question from the floor. Yes, hello.
Hi, my question is, given the drop in sales of magazines and newspapers and the rise in blogs, do you find that it's hard to amalgamate blogs to the magazine? Do you see them as a competitor, or is it a new role for magazines now to be something else rather than...
No, I think they're very different. I think that blogs are, brilliant for information now. They're a good hit. They're good. But I think I think somebody from the Indo said that, a newspaper is the best browser. Because if you think about it, a blog will feed you direct information that you want to know about. But if you pick up a magazine or a newspaper, there's all sorts of other little peripheral bits and pieces that work their way into your head. And I think that's something that women especially love. Or maybe I'm being too sexist here. But we love all the stuff. And, we may go into a magazine or we may go into a publication looking for fashion, but the beauty will hit out at you, or there might be a feature on something that has nothing to do with fashion that will suddenly become of interest. So I think they serve different purposes completely, and there's a lot to be said for the printed thing. Having said that, if you've got an iPad and you're sitting in an airport or you're in bed at night, it's great to scan through the blogs and read them. So I would see they're hugely informative, and they feed a huge amount of information and trends to us.
So you wouldn't be worried about them?
I think
a
there's
magazine?
space for
It's something
everything.
paid attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, you touched on something there, Melanie, that I'm just personally interested in. In a lot of industries, and we hear a lot of talk about, the high flyers in a whole spectrum of industries, there's more men than women, right? Fashion, and obviously you two, with 2 women sitting in front of us. Is it just because it's clothes, or why are women in fashion at the top of the game?
It's a good question. I've never really thought about it, have you?
Well, no.
Okay, do you know?
I mean, without having thought about it too much, I'm assuming it's to do with, general speaking, women tend to be more interested in fashion than men.
Well, yeah, I mean, women tend to be more, it's interesting, we think of men are the designers, more men are designing, and I think that's because men are not afraid of putting themselves out there and having that authoritative position, right? Maybe there's more women in fashion because women are actually willing to work more collectively. And an awful lot of fashion has become fashion departments, do you know what I mean? So that we come together as a group. Maybe that's why. Maybe, and also it is our thing. I mean, we are the planet Venus. Do you know what I mean? We're all about the visual expression. Whereas it's only a proportion of men are about the visual expression. Architects and designers, and that's it. So it is just probably that our lean is to create home and by extension to beautify ourselves. That's it. It's that simple.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Do we another question from the floor? Hi.
Hi, just wondering, as an editor, what would you expect from someone who wanted to pitch an article idea to you? Would you expect a full-blown article or just maybe like a round-up paragraph about it?
Okay, so pitching an article to an editor, what should they do?
Email, and if you don't hear an answer, resend. It's worth finding out who you're sending it to. So in other words, if you've got, and who writes what in the magazine. So you could always send it to the editor, which would be me. But if it's something about books, well then you might see who does the books pages. If it's something about food, you might see who does the food pages. So you send it to more than one person, if it's in image, and or if it's in a publication where there's a big staff. And then really, I suppose, you just need to send a paragraph. But if you're pitching one idea, you may as well pitch 4 or 5 varying types. And then if you have been printed already, or if you have a blog, attach a sample of your writing, or even if it's just stuff that you've written that gives an idea of your writing style. Because if you send in an idea, I've no idea if you can write it or not. So if you've a copy of some of your work or blog, I can get a better idea about you.
I'm a great believer in the letter, the initial contact letter, that, it's short and sweet. Don't overthink it, but you basically give some sense of your background and your personality in a short letter and what you're interested in. There's no point, again, in dissembling or covering all the bases. Again, as Melanie says, think about who it is, like what area of the publication you actually want to get to. Oftentimes people write to me and I write back saying to them, this isn't my area, but I'm going to tell somebody else. But a lot of the time, you can get cheesed off and just delete it. The other thing that's very important, again, everything is through email at this point. Hard copy, yes, I have a folder of hard copy letters, but I actually, there's 10 times as many in the folder on the computer. I do think a little picture of yourself is actually a good idea. I remember Paul Costello saying this about people, that once he has a picture, he can actually, so if you haven't got a blog, attach a small JPEG of you smiling, always smiling. If you're going, do submit a piece, make them short. Never, if they're too long, people won't read them. So when I say too long, I mean anything over 600 words is too long to be read. And a couple of samples is ideal, like 2 or 3 samples. Really, ideally 400 words, because but 6, I find actually myself 450, 500 words is the perfect thing to write about one thing quite well. And I always think the rule is also chop the first 3 paragraphs of anything you write as well, because that's inevitably just you trying to warm up in your subject.
I hate that rule, but it's so true. Isn't the 3 paragraphs you spend the longest on?
Yes, they are. Yeah.
I always say write the beginning last.
Yes.
Because you spend so long thinking about how you get into a piece that I always think that you should write the piece. When I'm writing a piece, I always write it as though I'm trying to tell it to somebody, and then look at it once I've written the bit of what I'm trying to say down, and then going, okay, I need to start it and then I need to end it. But normally that will flow quite easily once you've got the bones of what you're trying to say down.
I think imagining also, I mean, we're going off into writing, but it is important. I remember I struggled for years because I didn't plan to be a writer, but I ended up being asked to fill in for sickness leave and then kind of it growing from there. And what I realised, I used to struggle so much with trying to write about clothes in an interesting way. And I remember one day I was kind of like, I don't know, my 4th time round talking about Michael H. And I'm kind of going, like I was 30 years too young to be writing about Michael H. at that time, But I literally went, well, what can I say about Michael H. that is positive? And I literally wrote, what can I say about Michael H. that is positive? And that, well, they really always think about that woman down the country who has no direction and no guidance, and that woman who can't go into an ordinary shop every day and pick up off the peg because she's a size 16 and not a size 14. And that's how my style evolved. And what was very interesting to me is once I started having a conversation thinking about who needs this, who needs to know about Michael H., I then found that contact in my writing, and that's when my readership went up. So when I stopped being formal and actually thought about the need and trying to answer the need, that's when my writing got good and my fashion got much, much better.
I would add there's nothing worse than writing an expose speak, because it may work on the telly, but a lot of the time you read people and they sound like a voiceover for a fashion TV programme, and it's really, that's what, that doesn't work in
print.
I
actually analyse for content. And I mean, you can go through that with a highlighter and kind of be left with 5 words that actually meant anything. You know? Yeah. So, and this is the thing that, I think blogs are fantastic, and if anything, they're giving themselves the opportunity to practice and finesse themselves to a really good place, like me writing about Michael H. And getting that voice, that realization about myself. So I think blogging is great for that. But what I find a lot of very young people in the industry don't recognise that there is content to be given here, not just I like this because it's cool. Yeah. Let's have a bit of reasoning here, please. Let's have a bit of analysing. Let's give us some content and some reading. That's probably why I don't read an awful lot of blogs myself, because I just find it too flippant. And the imagery is great, I'll read that, but the words are meaningless to me because they're empty.
And then if you don't hear back, do send another email, resend the email, just going, I hope I'm not being pushy here, but just, I'm not sure if you saw this, because the chances are you could have sent it when the magazine is going to press, there isn't a chance to read it, then it gets dropped into the bottom of the pile or whatever, and time passes.
So it's not personal.
Yeah, it's a bit like Twitter, that if you miss a tweet,
it's gone.
It's gone. So absolutely send it again, and send it again, and send it again.
And use your subject box. The amount of people that just go, fashion release, and the first 2 words that show up in the subject box, the most important. So you say fashion writer, or fashion stylist, or new shoot, or Irish designer. You have to think.
Ideas.
Yes, ideas. Yeah.
Gold dust.
Yeah.
Ideas are gold dust.
Yeah.
Do bribes and alcohol work?
Absolutely, every time.
Box ticked. Any other questions from the floor at the moment?
Actually, I just wanted to ask about similar question to Tracy, but just in terms of graphic design, would you have to kind of go in at internship level, or would there ever be kind of opportunities when you're...
No, there's always opportunities, because I think especially, speaking, from Image's perspective, there's an awful lot of contract titles that we do. We do the Arnott's magazine, we do Cara, we do a few sort of once-off things as well. And we're always looking for art directors, because when there's an art director assigned to a magazine, they don't have the time to come in and do the extra stuff. So there is absolutely paid work, but you would need to have a really good portfolio with print experience, because obviously preparing stuff, I'm sure as you know, for printing is very, very different. For magazine printing is very different to anything else.
Right, we'll take another question from Twitter. La Wilco, I love that name, has tweeted us using the hashtag eBay.OFW, asking, who from the fashion industry do you most want to interview? Constance, do you want to take that one first?
Do you know, I really would like... I've met Jean-Paul Gaultier recently, so that was one ticked off. I think I would like to meet Tom Ford.
I'm with you there. Yeah. I've got close, but then the police came.
I met him very briefly last year, and he was very charming.
Was he?
Very charming.
What's the story with that old guy? Yeah. His partner. Yeah. He's looks like E.T. He's that old. Seriously. And I'm not ageist, but it seems like a complete, it's
That's why doesn't he see you? Is that it?
Yes, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. What was he like?
He was really charming, and actually what was so great, it was a beauty event, and the whole room was full of very nervous women. And he walked in, and the PR, God love her, dropped her handbag. She got such a shock. And she bent down to pick it up, and he just walked in and he said, "Hey, no need to courtesy."
Brilliant.
Which I thought was quite good.
So you've done Tom Ford, so to speak. Who would you still like to kind of get stuck into on a journalism point of view?
I interviewed Stella McCartney as one of my first jobs for Image, and I'd love to go back and interview her again, because I'd say I do a much better job this time around.
But they're toughies though, aren't they? I met Stella about 2-3 years ago, and the thing about the big designers is that they're controlled. There's guards, they're PR guards. If you ask any question that's not on the list, they don't like it. So to actually get a designer who's willing to talk off to the cuff, which is where Gaultier was lovely. He was willing to talk about anything. That's very, very rare. So Stella, I found her fascinating, and I think, but I got more from looking at her career than I did from the interview.
No, I found her quite tough, and I'd love to go back and have another shot at it.
But I'd love to meet Yoji. Yoji Yamamoto, or Rai Kawakubo, because they're two heroes of intellectual fashion.
I'll avoid my Y3s. They're gorgeous.
They're stunning.
And you know what, actually, on that note, because you've obviously, between the two of you, you've a wealth of experience. Any tips on how to get the best out of your interviewee? So, I mean, even if you are feeling slightly intimidated because it's Tom Ford, I mean, how do you just nail it?
Well, actually, one writer in Image told me a great line, and she herself isn't an extrovert. She's quite an introverted girl, and she was doing some interviews for us. And she said, when you turn around to somebody and say, tell me something personal about you, it's an interesting one, because they have, I mean, you're asking them quite directly to tell you something about them that isn't about the interview. And before they've time to think of it, they have to respond to you. And I thought that was a really, really good trick.
Constance, tell me something personal.
No.
How about you? Any tricks?
Don't arrive late, because that really fucks things up, right? Even 1 minute late. I had to interview Pamela Stevenson recently, and I was 1 minute late, and God, I was on the back foot for the whole bloody interview then. But she's a nice woman, so we kind of got past it after about 40 minutes. But whoops. Sorry, what was the question?
No, just how to get the best out of the subject when you're interviewing them.
Well, to show that you've researched them definitely
Yeah.
is one thing, because they really do get insulted if they think you haven't researched them, just as we do when people write to us and haven't researched a publication. And I think to be willing to see where they lead you, actually, you know, and if they're promoting a product, you're just going to have to, I actually like to call it right from the beginning, okay, we're here because of this product, so what's the most important thing about this product? Get it out of the way, and then get on with the rest of the interview.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they kind of open them up, see that time to loosen
Because
them, to
they're
rehearse
anxious
on
the
that as well.
whole time. They're anxious the whole time about the product that they're pushing.
Will you mention it? Will you ask them? That's,
So I make the position very clear.
Okay.
Like,
great.
okay, I'll give you 3 mentions, and now can we move past this and get to a bit of meat, because I can't give my readers just all product. You have to give them some of your personality. And sometimes I will talk that bluntly to them. Stella now, I don't know, but it's...
You gauge it, I
You
guess.
gauge it, yeah.
Another question on Twitter from L. Collins. What would your advice be for recent graduates looking for their first break in fashion journalism?
perseverance. You know, it's back down to the email that may not get replied to the first time, not to take it personally, to keep trying.
Keep reading fashion writing, where it's going at this point, and probably start up a blog just to get practicing for yourself. Yeah.
So the power of the blog, it's quite interesting.
And keep your blog up to date, says
Yes.
she who hasn't. But, you know, I mean, there's nothing worse than getting something that has a few little posts and then dwindles off.
What's the best part of your job?
Meeting people. For me, it is. I love meeting people.
I think for me, it's, I always say that magazine publishing is like a horse race, that you start at the beginning, off you go, you're down the track, there's an end, you finish somewhere along the course, and then you come back and you start again. So the fact is that every month there's something new to do, and there's whatever happened the previous month, it'll all be different again the next month.
If you fall and break a leg, will they put a bullet in your head?
I hope not.
I don't know. Let's hope, will you? You've hung on there long enough. A little cheeky question here from Dave B24. Who would you secretly love to put on the cover of your magazine? Assuming that they wouldn't be the right fit.
It's a very good question. I suppose because we usually just go with models, it would be interesting to put a personality on. It should be interesting to put an Irish personality on, but there's so many Irish magazines that are already doing that. I'll have to have a little think about that.
Okay.
Well, you see, we do varied covers all the time, so we don't, we don't have a formula that a women's magazine would have. So I love when we do very beautiful portrait photography, I have to say, where there's a real, for me, pictures, I mean, we haven't touched on this at all really, but I love...
You're all about photography.
I'm all about the photography, and for me, a good fashion shoot is not about perfection and beauty. It's actually about the fact that there's something there that taps into something in us, and that, there's a mood, or there's something that makes us look at it a tiny bit longer, So, and I love that in covers as well, where there's this the background of this person is somehow surrounding them as they sit there in splendid isolation.
I suppose we did a cover recently that was Natasha Polly's face in black and white that had a big lime green image on it. But in fact, there was another picture that we couldn't use, which was a full-length naked shot. And I mean, you didn't see too much. It was all very tasteful, but we couldn't use it because newsagents would automatically assume it was for the top shelf. But it was a really strong, really fantastic cover, and we couldn't use it.
Is it just me? Oftentimes when I see editorials, and you know one of the pictures has been used for the front page, I often find it's like the worst picture of the entire bunch. Is that just me? Or is there a reason behind that? I mean, obviously the profile-y ones.
It could be covered by committee where they're looking for the common denominator,
Right.
but the one you would choose would probably be different to the one I would choose, probably different to the one Constance would choose, so they're going for the one that hits the most bases.
Okay. Have we got any more questions? Should we go back to Twitter? Oh.
Hi, I'm just wondering, you were saying earlier that having a blog is really important on your CV, that you just go straight down and see if there's a blog. Is it important about having a degree in journalism, or is it more about the experience?
Absolutely not. I must say, speaking as somebody who doesn't have a degree in journalism, that usually employs people who don't have degrees in journalism, the only person I actually employed who had a degree in journalism we used for photography and shoots, so she didn't actually write. I think, you know, to work in magazines and probably fashion, it's all about your ideas and how you communicate them.
I mean, it's a medium that attracts personalities. That's the thing about magazines and newspapers, you know, and a personality emerges from experience. So, you know, I think oftentimes the journalists that come out of the journalism schools have great techniques, but they don't offer anything else. And all of us are looking for ideas, which another word is voice, is character, is personality. You know, I mean, in our newspaper, we have picked up people working on Beshoffs have ended up working in our newspaper just because they had a fantastic personality, you know.
They use the paper.
What? How many years ago was that? But so you know, no, you don't need a degree.
But actually, it's like you say, you're a Michael H. piece.
Yes,
You
yeah.
could have spent years in journalism college and not cottoned on to that.
Yeah. So
I think it's like in any industry, isn't it? If everyone's coming from the same mindset, it's hard to think outside the box, isn't it, and bring something new. And as you said earlier on, it's all about ideas. Ideas are gold dust.
And that's why practicing your voice all the time as a writer is essential. You know, even if it's diary keeping, you know, that every day you sit down and you commit to writing 2 or 3 pages, that's practicing your art form and realising that is the same as writing a column because you're finessing.
And it's equally, it's like anything that if you stop, it's like exercise. If you stop, you lose it. You know, so you literally have to keep writing or, you know, keep getting inspired.
Yeah.
Right, we'll take another question from Twitter. What are your thoughts on Grace Coddington and Anna Wintour? Are they portrayed well in the movie, and who's your favourite?
I'm a Grace girl.
And I'm an Anna girl.
Are you? It's quite interesting.
Why Grace?
I love her vision. I love her attitude. I love her backstory. My God, she was absolutely beautiful in the 60s, wasn't she?
And even now I still think she looks so striking.
She's just, I mean, personally, I love her aesthetic. I love that book that she did, everything.
I realised that I backed Anna from watching September issue because I saw Grace as about the past and about beauty, doing fabulous, beautiful costume dramas and perfect editorials. But Anna was there who was holding the bigger picture of American culture and the modern American woman, and was there kind of going, no, that's too indulgent, this is it. And I got a real sense of Anna Wintour holding that balance all the time of the modernity versus what we know is beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Because modernity is not necessarily beautiful, but we have to reflect it and we have to go with it. So that's why I came to really admire Anna Wintour in it.
I loved the scenes of one of them going up to the art room and trying to change something and going down, and the other one. And that absolutely happens all the time. You know, the poor art director, always in a magazine, is the peacemaker because somebody's trundling up going, no, don't like that, no. And the other person is going back going, no, put it back up again. And women don't talk directly to each other. We're all guilty of that.
Yes,
it all seems to funnel through a third party.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Kind of going, it's just thinking of the September issue and like the likes of big bloggers like Tavi sitting next to Anna Wintour. I mean, there was a time obviously where you guys were on the front row along with maybe celebrities or whatever at fashion shows, and that was it. And you know, the rest, if they were lucky, if they got in the room and were standing at the back. How do you feel about that kind of horizontalization? I know it's not even a word, but you know, the flattening out of not power but of the voice around fashion.
I would be as intrigued about a blogger as I would be about another editor. If they have something about them, if they've got a USP, if they've got a talent, if they've got something I don't have, I'm absolutely absorbed by them. So I would love to sit next to Susie Bubble at a show, and I'd be quite starstruck, and I'd probably be asking her a million questions. And I'd probably be more impressed with her sitting beside me than another editor.
How about you, Constance?
I think it all boils down to how obsessed you are with power and position. You know, if you're obsessed with power and position, you're going to feel threatened by them. You know, but if you're actually there watching the whole fashion scene play out with its fads and its favourites, then it's interesting. That's the way I look at it.
Do you have to be interested in power to be an editor?
I don't think so.
No.
Because I don't think, actually, I think it comes back to the whole thing about being decisive. There's so many decisions to make in a day that actually, if it's all you're about is politics and games, you're not going to get very far. The magazine isn't going to go to press because you really have to focus on the job.
To be an editor, magazine editor, fashion editor, you have to be passionate about the subject, actually. You know, I mean, anybody in newspapers and magazines eats, breathes, lives it, and with their last gasp is about the publication, you know. And it'll be interesting to see whether bloggers will have the same level of dedication as people who actually work in the concrete product do.
Another question on Twitter here. Again, if you want to tweet your questions in, just use the hashtag eBayOFW. Melanie, question for you. What do you think about Vogue putting celebrities on the covers versus models?
I love it because I think they choose their celebrities well, and they time it well. I think it's good, and I think the American Vogue ones are great too.
How about you, Constance?
I miss models, actually. I mean, when they were wonderful, because also, you know, when you look at all the covers, like you have all your covers, do you still have covers on the wall?
Yes.
And you're just looking at eras, you know, through the models, because they're so much a slave to the fashion style, whereas a cover with a celebrity is very much running to that celebrity's character. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's not so much about the fashion of the time and the slavishness about the false eyelashes, the hair colour or whatever. It's about the celebrity. So I think we're going to miss that in the covers because inevitably we get down to nude makeup, nude hair, you know, and a ball gown. That's what celebrity covers tend to mean to me, or nude makeup, nude hair and bikinis. Do you know what I mean? They're very formulaic, whereas I miss the fashion shot covers because they're about something else. They're about the photography and the makeup. And
I must say, I love the kind of the Testino celebrity ones that are on Vogue.
They're different.
But when you look at the InStyle, where in fact we actually got a load of American InStyles and put them on the floor of the office one day, they're all absolutely identical. They airbrush people to within an inch. Yeah. There was an Ellen DeGeneres who looked the exact image of Kirsten Dunst, and you're going, how does that happen? They even have the same colour masthead, and obviously because they've got a formula that works, that when people go to the newsstand 1 second they know what they're picking up.
It's
but
very
that is
do you think that's why they do it?
I do. I think it's all by formula and research.
And the colours.
And that's heartbreaking.
Their research.
Oh, the colours, yes.
Yeah.
A question for you, Constance. Any tips for photographers?
For photographers, the principal mistake that I see a lot of photographers making is that they don't actually study fashion photography. And so they don't see that actually there is a certain type of shot. And I know some that's really, really boring. And it's not that I'm advocating sameness, but there has to be a very clear focus within a fashion editorial. And so if they're submitting fashion shoots, they've got to think about, is there at least 3 or 4 shots where the garment is actually front and centre? Because the amount of times I get shoots where the garment is on the right-hand lower corner of the shot, and then I have a big street grey scape. And I remember D-Side, you know, might have done a little bit of that. And I remember Greg Delaney, when he did the wonderful magazine he had in the 80s, Black and White, Rant, that they would do that. But when you're in a commercial publication or you want to get into commercial, and let's face it, everyone wants to get into commercial because it pays, you know, then you have to think about a strong picture. So that's one. Secondly, about fashion photography, people don't think in terms of consistent themes. So you might get 6 shots, but actually 3 of the outfits will make sense with each other, but the other 3 will bear no relationship. And while that's a stylist's job, a photographer has to be aware of it too, because it's going to stop their work getting used or considered or seen to be strong. If a stylist is cohesive and strong, they make a photographer look super strong. So I would say to a photographer, nurture a stylist, try to find a good stylist.
Are there any up-and-coming photographers that you're quite excited about at the minute?
There's an awful lot of great photographers, both Irish and actually quite a few Polish people right now, and doing great work. And sorry, because I just wanted to say the other thing also that I see photographers doing is they fail to talk to models and make any connection with them, and they just treat models as these kind of blank beings. And it's really awful to see dead eyes in shots, or to see the possibility for some real mood and cinema within a fashion shoot, because I kind of see fashion shoots as cinema. You know, if they're not connecting with the model and giving her a role to play or a character and she's just there, they start to feel neglected and unloved, and it kind of comes out of the shots. So a photographer has a lot to do more than just, you know, set components up and click a thing. Sorry, the other question was, sorry.
Gone.
Gone.
Can I add something onto the photography
Yes.
thing? Because also, you know, when we look at portfolios, you need a photographer to have their own style. It's really
Yes.
annoying when you see a rehash of some shoot that you've seen somewhere else. Or they're all the, I'm going through my Paolo Reversi phase, or I'm going through my whatever. Develop your own style. And I can always remember, you had a great guy that worked with you for a while in the Indo. Was his name Tony someone or other, who did these kind of
Tony
paparazzi
Kelly.
shots?
Tony Kelly, yeah.
And it was very, very distinctive, but it was great. And he was marching to his own drum.
And
But-
he's now out in LA shooting, what's that crowd in Bottle Grafton Street? American Apparel. He's now doing their shoots out in LA.
But he wasn't a style that would suit everybody, but
No.
it absolutely suited your magazine at the time, and it suited his work, and he went somewhere with it.
Well, thank you very, very much. Thanks to our lovely audience. Thanks to our fantastic speakers. Constance Harris. Yes, and Melanie. And thank you for watching at home. We have had a flood of questions coming in that we haven't even got through all of them. So I was going to say keep them coming. We might try and get to some of them tomorrow. Tomorrow is the last of our chats. We've got styling as our topic with Karina Gaffey from Stellar Magazine and Angela Scanlon, stylist. So do join us then, 7 p.m, and Friday it's our fashion show. Thank you for tuning in.
Hooray.